406.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 411 from 406. This is your buddy Chewie, and I'm joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm glad to be back in podcast land. It's been too long. It's been a little while, as you like to say. I think we're going to have to rename our podcast to that, probably.
It's ladies and gentlemen, it's been a little while. Yeah. So Matt is right. It has been a while. The last podcast that was on the feed was actually one that I did solo, and I did it the night before WrestleMania. Part of the reason that we haven't podcasted in so long is we actually got together. Pip actually came to Cleveland. And we got to hang out for a weekend, which was super cool, super long overdue, and really kind of cathartic for me. I won't speak for you, but I had a blast. It was awesome, and we had these big plans of we were going to record a bunch of podcasts and put a bunch in the can, and that just didn't happen. But but it was awesome. I had a wonderful time. I hope you. First of all, thank you for making the trip to Cleveland. I know that it was a pain in the ass, especially coming off a family vacation. A lot of driving, but I appreciate you doing it.
No, it was not a thing at all. In fact, it was probably one of the best things that has happened to my soul since the whole COVID pandemic hit to begin with. We were on spring break the week leading up to that, took a day off, and then got back in the car and drove to Cleveland. Turns out driving to Cleveland's a lot quicker than driving to Florida from Indiana. So it was super easy. It was a breeze. I had an amazing time being there. It was so much fun. We got to do all kinds of fun stuff, visiting some breweries, some of my new favorite breweries that we got to visit out there. And then of course the catalyst, the whole reason we were there to begin with was the event of the season, WrestleMania, which
I thought overall was a good show. I think we can kind of get into that. I did want to talk a little bit about the breweries that we hit and what we did. So Matt came in. He came in Saturday this year. Normally you come in on Fridays, and again, it was so this year he came in Friday. My oldest son actually was at a birthday party. He was playing paintball in the middle of like Grafton, Ohio, and so we went to pick him up, and we had, I don't know, maybe an hour to kill, and we found this bar, the diviest of dive bars. We walked in there. It was the sun was out. It was a beautiful day, and we walked into this dark, dingy bar that makes every dive bar you've ever seen look pristine by comparison. It was called the Deluxe Bar in Grafton, Ohio. And the gal that was there working the bar, quote unquote, was she watching? Was she watching the Masters, or was she watching softball?
I don't think that was on. I think it was softball, women's softball.
But she was looking for the Masters.
Right.
She couldn't find it.
I don't know if that's an upgrade or not, but
right.
Whatever. Yeah.
So we hung out there for a shot and a beer, and I have to give you props. You're not normally a whiskey drinker, but you downed a shot of Jack Daniels.
I am not, but I am definitely a sucker for peer pressure. So I was in it to win it, man. I'm like, you could have made me drink anything. I was so excited to be there. I would have put any substance in my body and gone along with it.
Yeah, so then we went and we picked up my son, and then from there he had an AAU basketball game. So we went to a basketball game, watched the first of a couple basketball games. My wife actually, bless her heart, and I have to give her props for allowing the guys' weekend to commence the way. She's very good. We have 3 boys, and it's a lot for her to deal with them. But so she came and picked him up from the game. And then we went downtown Cleveland to the first of 2 breweries. We started at Bookhouse Brewing, which I will have to put some photos and a review and stuff on the blog. I haven't done that yet, but so remind me, was that the one we sat outside?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an absolutely beautiful day in Cleveland. I mean, it was in the high mid 70s. It was a beautiful weekend all
Maybe
weekend.
one of the nicest that we've had since we've been doing this at this time of year, because typically the weather is very cold or ranges from cold to very cold, potentially snow on the ground. I mean, it's never ideal weather, but this weekend it really worked out.
Yeah, it was perfect. Ironically enough, we have had 11 inches of snow over the last 2 days. It is April 22nd. Now, if the first 6 inches melted one night and then the next 5 inches melted the next night, but over the last 2 days, we've had 11 inches. So on the 22nd of April, as I record this. So we went to Bookhouse Brewing, and then we went to, I don't know, 3 blocks down the street, and we went to another place called Bad Tom Smith Brewing. And candidly, I don't remember the difference between the two, but I remember we had some really good beers at both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We both had flights and both sampled different styles, different IPAs, and I think you got some darker ones, and they were both good. I like them. I would go back to both of those places. They're nice.
Yeah. So those are, if you're familiar with the Cleveland area, those are both right downtown in Ohio City. And again, there's a bunch of breweries down there that are kind of walking distance to each other. So that was Saturday. Then we came home about just in time. We made dinner, and then we fired up what's the Peacock Network to watch night one of WrestleMania, which was a good show. So my brother Mark came over. And we did build a pyramid. It was it's not nearly as big as pyramids past. And I hate to say it, I don't even think we looked at our drinking game once in terms of the actual rules, but we were still partaking. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a blast, and we did our confidence pool like we usually do, and I ended up with a pretty poor record on the first night. I was a little grumpy about that, but I rebounded pretty well the second night. But it's my goal to take home the big fake John Cena trophy at some point, to bring him to Indiana to show him around, because he hasn't left the greater Cleveland area since we started this. Is this year 3 that we've done that?
This is year 3, and my son Grayson has actually won. He's won him twice.
Yeah. So, not even trying, and he's just like nailing it.
Yeah. So night one was a rough one for you, not in terms of picks necessarily, but just in terms of you put a lot of high value picks that night and lost those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So let's see. Night one was I'll pull it up here real quick. We don't have to go into a big huge review, but night one.
What was your favorite night? What was your favorite match from night one? If you have to look over it real quick.
I'll just run them down real quick. Bobby Lashley beat Drew McIntyre. Natalya and Tamina won a tag team turmoil match. Cesaro beat Seth Rollins. AJ and Omos beat the New Day. Braun Strowman beat Shane McMahon. Bad Bunny and Damian Priest beat The Miz and John Morrison. And Bianca Belair beat Sasha Banks. I don't know. I guess it would be, I hate to say it, might be the first match of the night, Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. Either that, the Sasha Banks and Belair match was really, really good. I remember enjoying that a lot.
That one might be the best. I mean, that one might be my favorite from the match, or from the night one.
Yeah. I think part of what I liked about Bobby Lashley and McIntyre was that Lashley won. I didn't think he was going to, and I always kind of like to be surprised. I just think Sasha Banks is an incredible performer, and Belair was in there and was really holding on, right there with her. Right, it wasn't like Sasha was carrying that match at all. So
right,
there was. I have to say, Bad Bunny. I realized that I am not the target audience at all for Bad Bunny. And we just kind of sat there and we were just kind of in awe of how much that guy did. I have to give him a ton of props. he wasn't just a quote celebrity in a wrestling match. I mean, like he was carrying that match. With my old school wrestling hat on, I'm not a fan of that, only because I think it kind of sucks to bury one of your wrestlers, i.e. the Miz, who basically got his ass kicked by a quote celebrity. But he did a really good job. I have to give him respect for what he did in the ring. I'm not a fan of that match, but I have to respect what he did.
Yeah, I agree. I was frustrated with that too. More so, I felt like pointlessly on behalf of the Miz, because I felt like if I were him, I would be really confused about why, when I was the world champion not too long ago, now you want me to put over somebody who is not even going to be a full-time performer in this thing. And it didn't make, I mean, they could have had him pin Morrison for, just as easily and saved a little bit of face with the Miz. But I didn't quite understand why they did that the way that they did. But I agree with you that Bad Bunny absolutely held his own in a way that I feel like a standard celebrity is usually very awkward. They don't have any experience. They're not seasoned. They're counting on the performers to basically do all the work. I don't think that was the case here. I really do think that he did an exceptional job for what he was asked to do. He very clearly trained for it and put himself through the motions.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think his tag team partner Damian Priest was in the match until like the very end. I'm pretty sure Bad Bunny was I don't know what that means for him. I don't know if he's going to be a performer. I don't know if he's going to continue to do stuff, but I have gathered that he is a pretty well-known rapper / performer, whatever he is well known for. And you know what? I mean, WrestleMania is a time of year when you bring eyes to the product, and I think it's fair to say that he did that. He brought eyes to the product. So, so good on them.
Yeah.
So let's see. Sunday then was another big brewery day. We woke up and we started at a place called Missing Mountain Brewery. That place I loved. It was the first time I was there. They had a Bloody Mary bar that was second to none, and that was kind of how we started our day. And they had some really, really good beers. Again, it was a beautiful day. Sun was shining, and this place was fucking packed. I mean, we got there at 11 o'clock, and we didn't think we were going to be able to get a spot.
On a Sunday, by the way.
On a Sunday, yeah.
I think they had a big brunch sort of theme, and that's why they got people packed in. But I agree, that place was fantastic. I would love to go back there again someday.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and again, we had another flight. I think 4 or 5 beers there. I don't think I had a bad beer there. I'll have to go back and kind of look. I don't even know if I took any notes, but it was they were very, very good. From there, we went to Ohio Brewing Company, which was about, I don't know, not even 2 miles down the road. Had another flight there, which was good. In my mind, not as good as Missing Mountain, but still had some good beers. And you have anything to add about Ohio Brewing?
I liked it. I would say it may be my least favorite, but not because it was bad, just because I felt like the others stacked pretty high. It doesn't come anywhere near Missing Mountain. I think they just had a different variety there that was really good, and the ambiance and the menus and all that stuff. Ohio Brewing Company just kind of felt like a big bar. It didn't really feel like a brewery. It felt like some place that a lot of people congregate, late at night and dancing and all that, all the things all those young whippersnappers do these days. But I mean, it was perfectly good. It was serviceable. I think that was the one place that we went to that I actually didn't have a flight because they didn't have a huge selection of their own beers. They had a really good selection of beers in general, but I felt like the selection of what they were doing specifically was a bit limited. So I went with I don't remember what it was called, but it was the one you recommended that I really liked, and it was very good. But that was quickly. I think as soon as I put a couple bucks in the jukebox, I'm like, wait a minute, if we're gonna drink beer and put money in a jukebox, there's only one place we need to be right now.
That's exactly right. And so we made our way to the one and only Annex Bar and Grill. And in fact, I'm looking at my Twitter feed, and when I checked in there, I said, "And now the weekend is complete." and so we sat at the Annex and we ate burgers. If you've ever had an Annex burger, in my opinion, it's the best burger you can get. And we started Pip started rifling quarters into that jukebox, and was very polite and asked if it would be okay because the entire bar was watching the Masters when we got there, which is just in like bizarro world if you know what the annex is like. And we said, hey, could we put on some kind of 80s metal and that kind of stuff? And she said, absolutely, I would love that. I think she was a little bit sick of the of the Masters at that point. And I don't know, we stayed there 3 or 4 hours, something like that.
A little while.
Yeah. And I have to say that your DJ skills are on point, sir. It was a wonderful mix that you came up with that afternoon.
Well, you're clearly my target audience, so you're an easy lay in that respect, Greg.
Right.
It wasn't too hard, and I'm not sure all the golf fans were super happy about it, but everybody played along, and I really did appreciate that.
Yeah. And then it was home for night 2, right? And so night 2 was Randy Orton beat The Fiend, Nia Jackson's Shayna Baszler beat Natalya and Tamina, Kevin Owens beat Sami Zayn for the 487th time, Sheamus beat Riddle, Apollo Crews beat Big E, Rhea Ripley beat Asuka, and Roman Reigns beat Edge and Daniel Bryan. I think I preferred night 2 from a wrestling standpoint more than night 1. I suppose I guess if I was laying out a 2-night show, that's the way I would have preferred it, and on a high note. I think I probably would say the main event was my favorite. Roman Reigns beating Edge and Daniel Bryan. I was all in on Edge. I was pulling for Edge. Yeah, that was my pick. That's who I wanted to win. But I think that probably the Rhea Ripley and Asuka match is probably my close second. So that makes the last 2 matches of the night are my 2 favorite. So
I would call that exactly the same. With maybe the Owens Sami Zayn match being a 3rd place. I'm not real sure. I'd have to think about that. I would say that the Orton match was a little bit more disappointing than I thought. I thought it would be at least a little bit more theatrical, or at least longer. It feels like in hindsight, it feels like it only lasted about 5 minutes.
It was 5 minutes and 50 seconds. That's exactly right. And it was weird because the way it ended, it ended with this kind of theatrics, and it ended with Alexa Bliss, like, I don't know, bleeding, inking. I don't know what she, like, it was weird. Yeah, I agree. I was really, really let down by that match. And it wasn't that they ran out of time, because it was the first match of the night. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, but I guess if I'm caught between trying to carve out times for all these matches, I would rather see more time in a Kevin Owens Sami Zayn type of match, because those two have a history. They've been wrestling each other for well over a decade at this point. And I think that they from a talent perspective, they put on a better show, not so much in a theatrical way, but more in a technical way. And so I think that was probably pretty smart.
No, I guess you're right. Purely from a wrestling standpoint, I would much rather see more in-ring wrestling between 2 guys, as opposed to the theatrics of that The Fiend and Randy Orton brought. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
That being said, I feel like The Fiend / Bray Wyatt, I just feel like he never gets his due. I don't know. Maybe it's me, or maybe I'm just not paying enough attention to wrestling outside of WrestleMania. But it just seems like the guy is super powerful, super talented, and they just kind of find weird things for him to do all the time. Like last WrestleMania was that really bizarre John Cena match, and I didn't like that at all. Like I saw what they were trying to do, but just seems like they're wasting some of his talent, and I'm not sure if that's a conscious effort or just the byproduct of having too many people on a single card.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think Bray Wyatt is a crazy, crazy talented in-ring performer, and the character that he has come up with, I wasn't super sold on it at first, but like now it's got like a kind of a boogeyman, kind of old school 80s vibe, and I actually really like it. And so I'm slightly intrigued to see where they go with this, like with him and Alexa and this, that, and the other thing, But I would agree. I think at least from a WrestleMania perspective, the last 2 years for him, in my opinion, have been big letdowns. I did not like the Cena thing last year, and I thought this year was promising, but the way it ended, especially, I wasn't a fan at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Tonight we're doing some more wrestling tonight. I guess it's only appropriate coming off WrestleMania weekend, and this has kind of been a brainchild, or this series that we're getting ready to do has been kind of your brainchild. So I will let you kind of introduce what it is that we're doing tonight.
Yeah, so I am excited about this. This is kind of a special edition series that I thought would be really fun to do when we started doing this, because we kind of kicked everything off in this podcast when we started doing these together, doing our top 5 favorite this or that. And at some point during this, I thought, wouldn't it be really fun to revisit these lists and do our 6 through 10s, which is basically, our favorites past our favorites, or our groups of second favorites. And I got really interested in the idea of taking these lists and sort of deconstructing them and trying to come up with, who's next on these lists, or which movies are the next ones on the list, or whatever. And so I thought, I think it's a great idea to sort of continue the theme of wrestling. We did was it our first podcast that we did together?
It was actually the first one that you were on. Yes, it was. It was the very first one that we did. Yep.
So we called it the top 5 favorite, and then we also called it our Mount Rushmore, which I'm surprised nobody called us on that, because last time I checked, Mount Rushmore only has 4 faces, but we did top 5. But the point was we were doing our favorite wrestlers of all time. And we'd like to continue that tonight, but instead of our top 5, we're going to do our 6 through 10, which I don't know about you, but personally, that's a way harder list, because, I can, even if I wasn't paying attention to wrestling these days, I could rattle off my favorite wrestlers without a problem. But if I had to sit down and really think, okay, but who's the next group of wrestlers that I really liked, but maybe didn't make the cut the first time around, and then try to rank them in some kind of way, it was kind of difficult. I don't know. What was your experience like with this?
Yeah, I would agree. Part of the reason that I was excited about doing this too, and I am excited about doing future 6 through 10s, is, you read a lot of lists on the internet, you listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of top 5s, right? And most of the time, for guys our age, right, those top 5, there's a lot of overlaps, right? And so I think we're going to start to see a lot of different names or movies or whatever it is as we get through these. I would agree that this was a more difficult list to come up with, just because the differences between number 10 and 11, 6 and 8, 7 and 9 are much more minute than they are between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 in those in my at least on my list, right? Once you started getting down into the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 range, there was a lot of guys that could be in that spot. Whereas for me, like my top 1, 2, and 3 were very easy, right? That top 5 list, the only difficult thing really for me was which order they were going to be in on that particular night, and who I was going to leave out. And so it was really only the 5 and 6 spot was kind of difficult. So
yeah. So I think one thing we should do this time is try to mirror a little bit of what we did last time, which is, I don't think last time we actually put them in order. I think we just picked our 5 favorites, and we just kind of talked through them in the order that we chose them, but not necessarily in the order of our absolute favorites of all time. So maybe we can do that this time, but maybe first, before we get into that, let's give the people a refresher of what we chose on our top 5, so they have a little bit more context on why our 6 through 10 is lined up the way that it is.
Certainly. Yeah. Would you like to go first this evening, or would you like to go second this evening?
I'll go first. That's fine.
Okay.
I think I'm more interested in what you have, so I'll defer to you. So to wrap everything up. So first, I'll go through my old list, and I won't go into any of those guys. We talked about all that stuff before. If for anyone who might be interested in that, who hasn't listened to it, it should be archived under our podcast. So please go grab a copy. But my old list was, in no particular order, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Macho Man Randy Savage, Jake the Snake Roberts, Roddy Piper, and Bret the Hitman Hart. So those were my my five. With if I am picking a favorite, it was Jake Roberts. He was always my my big go-to back in the day, being a technical wrestler and having the greatest finishing move of all time, in my opinion. So I guess I'll give him a little bit of depth as a recap. And then The Rock was we did give each other honorable mentions. I think you sprung that on me without me knowing it, and which I love when that happens. And so I added The Rock, who I'm making it a point, obviously being a 6 through 10 list, none of the first 5, including my honorable mention, will be on my list. So do you want to go through your list first, and then I'll start mine?
Sure. Yeah. So my original top 5, again, in no particular order, was Stone Cold Steve Austin, Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and The Undertaker. And my honorable mention was John Cena. If I were to pick my number one,
it's Taker. I know it's Taker.
It is. It's Taker. It is. It's Undertaker. The 1A there would be Macho Man. Macho Man, to me, I have found that I've grown to love Macho even more as I'm getting older. Right. The more I watch of him, the more I appreciate him. I probably appreciate him more now than I did even when I was growing up. But you're right. It is Taker. I've always been an Undertaker mark. So, okay. So here we go. We're going to start with 6 through 10. I suppose it's maybe 7 through 11 if you're not going to include the honorable mention.
Yeah, that's true.
So here you go. Who you got your first pick this evening?
Well, just to do the smoothest segue in the history of these lists, my number 6 is The Undertaker. He had to be on my list. He very closely came into my original top 5. The Undertaker, I think, goes without saying. I mean, you covered it, immaculately in our first podcast. The guy is an absolute beast. He's the phenom. He's the last time I got to see a wrestling match live and in person was with you, and we got to see him in a Buried Alive match with Mankind. And I think I still remember seeing him get introduced for the very first time when he was introduced as Kane the Undertaker at Survivor Series as by Ted DiBiase. And he, from that moment, very quickly established his dominance and did not stop for many, 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 many years. And there's 2 things that I think that really endear me to The Undertaker. The first being that he never left the WWE. He's one of the major top A-level superstars that never defected to the WCW. I mean, when you look at the list of all the legends, I mean, the argument can be made he wasn't in the Legends era, that he sort of came along as a lot of them were aging out. But, he did come in when young enough to wrestle Hulk Hogan, probably shortly past Hogan's prime. But, he was in there with that group. But he never went to the WCW. Compared to Hogan, Macho Man, DiBiase, Bret Hart, I mean, you name it, everybody went there to get a paycheck. And he stuck with the company, and I think Vince really appreciated that. And I think he's going to be, I think he's going to go down in history as maybe number 2 to Hogan. Hogan is different because he was the face, and he helped launch the company and put 93,000 seats in the Silverdome. And but The Undertaker, I think, has had more longevity. I think he's had more diversity to his character. I think he's just been more exciting. I think he's earned more respect from his peers, guys like Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, nobody has a bad thing to say about The Undertaker. The second thing that I really, really like about him is that he was clearly the leader in the locker room. There was a point within his career where he was established, and nobody did anything without, sort of the blessing of The Undertaker, as far as, the talent and things like that. And there's a lot of great stories. I saw one the other day. Cody Rhodes was doing a shoot on, I think, the first Royal Rumble that he was ever in, and he went up, he got in, he was so jazzed, and he didn't even really know what he was doing. He went up and he hit The Undertaker in the back of the head and really clobbered him, and The Undertaker just did one of those really slow turnaround moves. And Cody's thinking, oh shit, like I'm gonna die, like the guy's gonna kill me. And The Undertaker walks up to him, while he's behind his really long hair, and he said, kick me in the, I'm gonna pick you up, kick me in the knee. Like, he gave him a spot, basically. And he's like, the Undertaker never had to do that. Like, he didn't owe me anything. And I just think that he's one of the most respected guys in the game. And if I can make one last plug, is it The Last Ride, the name of the documentary that's on the WWE network?
Oh, it's so good.
Like 10 hours or whatever, 5 or 6 hours. I don't remember how long it is, but it's really long. It's really hard to watch because it's clearly him in the twilight of his career, just trying to talk himself out of wrestling year after year after year. But it's really good, and it really helps to sell how important he's been to this company for so long.
Yeah, he's my all-time fave. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I'm glad. I'll be honest with you. I'm surprised to see him on your list, but I'm glad that he's there. He's the phenom. He's the GOAT in my opinion. So, okay. So my first one this evening is he is the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. He is the Honky Tonk Man. The Honky Tonk Man, it comes from an era of professional wrestling for me, and this is where I knew him. Right, he was in the WWF. Right, so this is like 1985, 86, something like that. And he was this kind of smarmy heel. He was playing, he was a bad Elvis impersonator. He had the big chops. He was a boisterous, over-the-top heel that nobody liked. You weren't supposed to like him. You're supposed to hate him. And, the 10-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever it was, me, hated him, right? And I was rooting against him every single time. And, probably the most iconic match of the Honky Tonk Man is actually one that he lost, right? It's when he lost the Intercontinental title to the Ultimate Warrior at I think it was a SummerSlam, and he lost it in 16 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever it was. But it was Honky to me is like, he's just the consummate heel in that era of wrestling. I mean, he was just a bad guy through and through. Yeah, I mean, he had some people that cheered for him occasionally, but he was a bad guy, and you knew it. And he knew how to be a heel both in the ring and out of the ring, whether he was by himself or if he had a manager, Jimmy Hart, and he was paired sometimes with Greg Valentine and those kind of things. I was just a huge fan of the Honky Tonk Man. I love that character. He went on to do some other things, and I think he's actually, believe it or not, still wrestling occasionally on the indie scene even today. But just a huge fan of the Honky Tonk Man. Love him.
Absolutely. I think he's one of the most hated heels of all time.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that, if I can sort of try to throw my mind back at that time frame, the thing that made me hate him so much is that he had the Intercontinental belt for what felt like forever, because he ended up being Steamboat after Steamboat and Randy Savage had their legendary match in WrestleMania 3, and held that title, I think, for over a year. I mean, it was like 64
weeks or something like that. Yeah,
it was really long. Yeah. It felt like a really long time. But he was just one of those guys that he couldn't be anything but hated. Like, there's no way to like that character. And I think he played it in a very, very intelligent way. He wasn't the most skilled in-ring technician, but he certainly held his own. I will say that I didn't really love his stint with Greg Valentine when Valentine dyed his hair. That became the Rhythm and Blues.
It was terrible.
Tag team. That was not especially interesting, but the guy knew how to sell, and I loved a wrestler. At the time when I was younger, I didn't know how to appreciate hating a wrestler, but looking back in time, like, the more I hate them, the more over they are, right? Like, that's what the company wants, and that's the sign of a really, really good character for sure.
Yeah. All right, who you got, sir?
Well, it's funny you should bring up the Honky Tonk Man, because my next one happens to be the guy that beat him in those very brief seconds at SummerSlam '88. It is Indiana's own Jim Hellwig, aka the Ultimate Warrior. I'm a little ashamed of this, I'm not going to lie, because if you're a wrestling fan and you swim in these circles, you know that the Ultimate Warrior is kind of known for not being the easiest guy in the world to work with, from a front office perspective and from an in-ring perspective. But there was something about him when I was a fan and I didn't know any better that was such an incredible breath of fresh air. And I couldn't believe it when they put him over Hogan in Toronto in WrestleMania 6. I just couldn't. And for me, I was hoping he'd last forever. I really was, because he had the body paint. He had the chiseled body, like literally nobody else had that body in the business at that point. And it was so impressive. And he just seemed so completely invincible. And the energy and the nonsensical rants in the interview segments that he did, he made for one of the most entertaining characters ever. And in hindsight, looking back, like, I can understand why most people did not have a lot of respect for him. I mean, he did a lot of pretty shady stuff. He held up the WWE on a couple of occasions and got fired for it on a couple of occasions. I was glad that eventually at the end they made amends and they got him back in. And of course, very tragically, he died shortly after it was like the night after his last appearance on Raw, where he came out and did kind of a thing. I just thought he was a great spectacle. I'm not sure he was great at anything else, but as far as watching him sprint to the ring and shake those ropes and pin Honky Tonk Man, and the guy who held the title for over a year in about 30 seconds, not even that, and walk out the Intercontinental title, I just remember being completely blown away. So I loved him as a kid. I thought he was super fun.
Yeah, most people were either Hogan fans or Warrior fans, right? I was always a Hogan fan, but I have, to me, if you look back at that era is defined by a single match to me, and it is Hogan Warrior, right? Like that era is, and that was kind of the passing of the torch, but that was like those were the kind of two big icons, right? And yeah, I again, Warrior was never one of my favorites, but I was thrilled to see him get into the Hall of Fame eventually. Unfortunately, the night before he passed away, or 2 nights or whatever it was, but I'm glad he got his due. I'm glad he's a Hall of Famer. And I love the fact that they named an award after him that they give out every year now at the Hall of Fame. And it's for kind of, it's not charity. It's I'm not even quite sure what it.
I think it's about charitable work.
Is it?
I think that's. Yeah. I don't remember the exact theme of it, but yeah, they don't give it for performance. It doesn't have anything to do with the talent or the business in that respect, but they do give it to talent for doing things. I think Titus O'Neil was the one that was the recipient for this most recent year, and he won it for a lot of his charitable donation work and things like that. So
yeah, I just think that's I love the fact that they named it after him. So yeah. Good pick.
I will say that it was an attempted passing of the torch at WrestleMania 6, because Hogan yes. very gleefully took it back about a year later at WrestleMania 7, and then took it back at WrestleMania 9. So it was clear that somebody thought Hogan still had some juice in the tank.
Some juice, yeah. Okay, so my next one is one that probably will not be on your list if I had to guess. There are professional wrestlers that are talkers. There are professional wrestlers that are technicians, and there are some guys that the best of the best kind of do both. This guy, I think, is probably my favorite in-ring performer of all time, and that's not to say that he doesn't cut a great promo, because he does. He is probably the epitome of the everyman for me. This is Arn Anderson. I love Arn Anderson. He is one of the original Horsemen. He is probably most well known, at least by WWE fans, for his stint as one of the Brain Busters with him and Tully Blanchard. But Arn Anderson, to me, I mean, he Ric Flair obviously is the most well known of the Horsemen, but Arn Anderson to me is the backbone of the Horsemen. He's he's known as the Enforcer. He's just kind of one of these guys. He goes in there. He's not one of these kind of huge over the top, Hogan or Sid type characters, right? But he looks like an everyman, right? He goes in there and he can be ruthless. He can he's always carrying the mat. He's the working man, right? And I loved his work as in the Horsemen. I loved him as with Blanchard as part of the Brainbusters. I've just been a huge fan of his work forever. I'm thrilled. I remember I was thrilled when they came over the WWE or WWF at the time, because I was a huge fan of his as the Horseman over in WCW at the time, or NWA. Actually, this was even before WCW. But I was so pumped to see them over in WWE, and I just love Arn Anderson.
It's a really interesting pick. It's definitely not on my list and not something that I would have guessed. I don't know that we've ever had a conversation about him specifically. I know we've certainly gone through our videos and watched the Brainbusters many times, but I can't argue with his talent. I mean, he doesn't do anything flashy, but he just goes in there and he does what he's supposed to do. And he is somebody that I think has spent a lot of years in the front office after his tenure as a talent in front of the camera. It's funny because my memories of him aren't especially endearing because he wasn't the Ultimate Warrior, right? Like, he wasn't flashy. He didn't jump off the top ropes, or if he did, it was
an axe handle.
It wasn't, when I was watching at that time in my life, I was young and sort of not, I was more impressionable by the spectacle of it all. And there was really no spectacle about Arn Anderson in that respect.
None.
But he was an amazing talent. Him and Tully Blanchard, both as part of the Brainbusters, were a phenomenal tag team, but one that I found extremely boring because they wore, they wore red trunks. They didn't really cut. I mean, that's why I assume why they stuck him with Bobby Heenan, so he could be the mouthpiece and let Bobby cut the promos for the most part. And there wasn't really anything flashy or exciting about them, but technically what they did in the ring, they did extremely well. I believe they had the titles for a while. I don't think either one of them did any significant single work outside that in the WWE specifically. Obviously, they did what they did in WCW or NWA or whatever it was that they were before. But yeah, that's a really good pick. Certainly not what I expected, but that's the beauty about this list is that names like that come out of nowhere. It's like, oh man, I never thought about that guy, but that's a really good pick.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I'm looking now. They were actually only in the WWE for like a year. I mean, they were there for 1 year.
That makes sense.
And then they went back to WCW, and he was he won a gang of titles in WCW. But I think just to put a bow on it, I think I loved him as part of the Horsemen, and then he kind of became my guy of the Horsemen that I really loved. I think I'm pretty sure he's actually a part of AEW now. I think he's either a road agent or he's not wrestling, but I'm pretty sure he's part of AEW now. So, anyways, all right, what do you got next?
So my next one, going through my list, there's definitely a disparity between technical wrestlers and sort of the more outlandish characters. Technical guys being like Jake Roberts and Macho Man, and characters being like Roddy Piper and the Ultimate Warrior. This next guy, I think, is a good mix of both, but definitely more of a technical wrestler. I think that's where he gets most of his credit. And I would say that there are some wrestlers that are known for taking really great bumps, like Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels. This guy is up there in that list with almost cartoonish sometimes, but in a way that sells it in the best possible way. It is Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. He is such an amazing, underrated talent. And I don't know that underrated is even fair to label him with that. I think he's going to be forgotten in the grand scheme of things from fans' perspectives over the years, because he wasn't, he came up in an era where the bodies were like the Ultimate Warrior and Andre the Giant and guys, Hulk Hogan and guys like that. But I mean, this guy made anybody and everybody look good. I mean, he gave Brutus the Barber Beefcake his best match ever. And Brutus is not exactly a wrestler of technical epic proportions on any
which
level.
which is saying a lot to give Brutus a good match, right? Yeah.
In fact, if memory serves, Beefcake was the first one to get him pinned, because Mr. Perfect's big thing for a while is he was undefeated in WrestleMania 5 or 6, maybe 6. They wrestled each other, and Beefcake catapulted him into a ring post, and he got the pin. And that's
right. Yeah.
time I saw Mr. Perfect get pinned. But Mr. Perfect could go up against anyone, anytime. His best matches were, in my opinion, definitely against Bret Hart. I think that they had some incredible matches. I know that Bret Hart respected him with the utmost, highest degree. And I think his career was cut short with a lot of injuries. And of course, him, like many other people on this list, died way too short. But man, the guy was just a talent. He was so, so good. The Perfect Plex. I credit anybody who had a finishing move that I'd never seen before. And I'm sure that move has been done before. It's just a cradle suplex, I think is what it's called. But he was the first one to sort of mainstream it. And the promos were the best promos ever, right? That he cut, like throwing basketballs behind his head. He had this move where he'd walk to the ring and he'd spit out his gum and he'd slap his gum while it was in midair. And it was just like the coolest thing. He was the cockiest, biggest jerk, but I loved it. I loved everything that guy did.
Mr. Perfect. So back in the last episode that Matt and I recorded together, which was episode 42, we were talking about our all-time favorite action movies. We had something happen that had never happened before on the podcast, where we both chose the same movie for the same spot in our list. I believe it was The Matrix. I don't remember which number it was. But I'm thrilled to say that has happened again, because my next pick is Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, you said it, right? He was, yeah, I mean, he was perfect, right? He was the perfect heel. He came into the WWE as this guy with these vignettes that you hated him before he even stepped in the ring. I actually remember him. He won the AWA world title from Nick Bockwinkel. And I'm pretty sure he used a roll of quarters in his fist to hit Nick Bockwinkel. And if you're not familiar with Bockwinkel, he was kind of the AWA's version of Flair, right? He was kind of the older, stately gentleman that had their title, cheat to win, and Hennig at the time was the up and comer. But where he really kind of came on and exploded again was once he got to WWE and took over the perfect persona. He had Bobby Heenan with him. He was always in Heenan's stable. And I mean, yeah, he was an amazing technical wrestler. I can't add anything else. Mr. Perfect was, I loved him. He was awesome.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
So, yeah. All right. So who is next, sir?
For mine,
you got two more.
This is one that definitely teeters more to the character side, although I think he's a bit underrated as a technical wrestler. And another guy that I felt like I didn't get enough time with. He was easily the biggest, maybe not the biggest, but certainly in the top 2 or 3 of the most notorious heels in the heyday of wrestling that I love, which was WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 5. He had the best laugh in the business. There's just nobody like him in this respect, and it was Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. I love the $1 Million Man. I still love the guy. I think he's great. He always put on such an amazing show, and I hated him. I always hated him because he never let my guys win. Like he had a program with Jake Roberts for a long time, and I thought for sure Jake Roberts was going to win the $1 Million belt, and it never happened. No, I don't think anybody ever won that $1 Million belt from him, but I can't remember. Maybe somebody.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But I loved everything about him. I thought he kind of, not unlike Perfect and Flair, he definitely was very grandiose with some of his bumps, right? Like he took a bump really well. I remember he had this move that he missed 100% of the time, where he stood on the second turnbuckle and he fell backwards to drop the elbow. He never once hit that. Maybe he never hit Iron Mike Sharp or Barry Horowitz with that one time, but I never saw him. It's like you knew that was when the match was going to turn, was when he did that. But I think he was very, very much well respected in the locker room as one of those guys who would do everything he could to put you over and to have a good match with. And for that, I always thought that Ted DiBiase was one of the greatest talents, one of the best heels that was ever in the game, for sure.
Yeah, I was a big fan of DiBiase as well. I loved all the stuff that he did with the $1 Million Belt, all the skits where he was, he'd bring cash into the ring and what would he make the fans do and those kind of things. Yeah, great pick. I love DiBiase. And he was there's a podcast that I think you listen to too. It's with Bruce Pritchard. Something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, and according to Bruce, and he would know because he was very instrumental in the creation of that character. That character basically is Vince McMahon, just kind of turned up to 11, right? Which I obviously don't know Vince, but that doesn't shock me at all, and I love that character.
I think it's really interesting if you listen, because that podcast is great for anybody who listens to this who likes wrestling. You have to go back and listen to every single episode of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard with oh gosh, I'm gonna forget his name now.
Conrad Thompson,
thank you. It's so good, and they spend a whole episode on Ted DiBiase, and they talk about how, back in the day when they were establishing this character, the rules were very strict. This was obviously well before the internet and cell phone cameras or cell phones and all that stuff. And like the characters, even if they were friends in real life, couldn't be seen with each other because they had to maintain the mystique of what the stories were that were being told. So so there was a big push to like Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik, they couldn't ride in the same car wherever they were going. Well, to further sell Ted DiBiase's character, they had to make it look like he was legitimately a millionaire, which he wasn't. But they made him ride around in limos all the time, and they made him eat at fancy restaurants, and they made him do all this stuff. And he's like, I don't know what I did to get in this gimmick, but it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me because they made me do all this stuff, and I just had to sell the character.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great. That's my fourth one, I guess, on this.
No, that's a great pick. Okay, so my next one is by far the most recent pick. It's CM Punk. CM Punk and primarily the stuff later in his career. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy his stuff earlier. So he went through, obviously he came from Ring of Honor and he kind of was an indie darling, for lack of a better term. Busted onto the scene and went through several kind of years of being the straight edge superstar and those kind of things. Won a gang of titles, but really for me, when I really got into CM Punk was when he kind of got into the best in the world moniker, right? When he was talking about how he was the best wrestler, the best technical wrestler. He had a program with John Cena. He had a program where he was leaving the WWE. He had a famous, they call it the pipe bomb, where he sat down and he did this kind of 30-minute promo at the top of the stage, and it was it was clearly scripted, but it was he was talking about a lot of things that were kind of breaking the fourth wall, breaking kayfabe, and he was talking about other wrestlers and other companies, and he was talking about how Triple H was going to take over the WWE when Vince died. It was a different thing for me at that time in my wrestling fandom. It was something that I hadn't seen in a long time. Not to mention the fact that dude is just straight up really, really good in the ring. I mean, he's a great technical wrestler in the ring. Ironically enough, he left the WWE and he went and he tried his hand at MMA. Ironically enough, Pip and I actually got to see that fight. We were sitting in a B-Dubs in Indianapolis. Our other buddy Steve was actually working there that night, and we got to watch that fight where he just got mauled. I mean, he lost in the first round in very short order, but that does not take away anything he did in the WWE. CM Punk is an outstanding performer. I wish that he hung on longer and stayed around longer, but I think he's just kind of lost his zeal for the business. So love him though.
Wasn't Lesnar on that pay-per-view too?
You talking about the MMA pay-per-view?
The UFC one, because I I remember either tweeting or making some comment on Facebook about us watching Ultimate Fighting, and the two matches we were there to watch were CM Punk and Brock Lesnar. I might be missing.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure that was. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure that I think that card was actually in Cleveland, if I'm remembering it correctly. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember.
That's a really solid pick, though, and I think he was one of the best from his generation, and he's certainly one of the ones where I wished he would have stuck around longer. And if anything, and I'd pose this question to you, it's just sort of a goofy hypothetical, but do you think he missed his mark by maybe about 10 years? Like, can you imagine if he'd have come into business, if his character would have come into business about 10 years earlier, and he would have been able to spar both physically and verbally with the likes of Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, more so in his prime, The Rock, Stone Cold
Austin in his prime, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine him? And I mean, it was good that he was where he was because he helped the business, continue to breathe and thrive. But man, could you imagine if you could fantasy book that guy against some of his peers in previous generations? Holy shit, man, that would have been intense.
Yeah, it would have been. I agree. He would have been. I think had he had more peers to go up against, I think he would kind of have elevated to, one of the he'd be in the discussion of greatest of all time. You know what I mean? Like in that discussion. Yeah.
He's also one of those that I know gets tagged a lot as somebody that everybody wants to see come back, and I think that's one I legitimately hope he does not come back. Not because he couldn't do it, but just because I think he very much realizes that he doesn't want to become a sideshow or a novelty.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it's different from like The Rock or somebody like that who comes back, who's still very much in the public eye and still very endeared by his fans. I think he could pull that off. I don't know that Punk could in the same way, but yeah, no, that's a great choice.
Yeah. All right, so you got one more. Who is it?
Okay, so my last one is going to be a trivia question right back at you, and I'm going to see if you know this. All right. So my final guy shares a very interesting bit of trivia with none other than Hulk Hogan as being one of the only two individuals to have competed in each of the first 9 WrestleManias.
Santana.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is
Chico,
the man himself, Tito Santana. I fucking love Tito Santana. I thought he was the best. Singles, doubles, I didn't care. I don't know what it even is about that guy. I think he's a very good technical wrestler. I think his character is whatever. I did not love El Matador when they brought him back to try to refresh that gimmick. But as a singles competitor and especially as a tag team, I loved him. He did a great job. He was very good. He was very technical. He had this back body drop that was sort of unique. Like whenever he did one of those, it just looked different. It looked cool. His finisher, the flying forearm, I love that thing. Like when he popped that thing, the crowd just went nuts. He did spend some time both with the Intercontinental belt and as a tag team champion with none other than Rick Martel of Strikeforce, which I loved Strikeforce. They had the worst 80s cheese dick song for an entrance song ever.
The Girls in Cars.
Girls in Cars. But I love that shit. I had the Pile Driver album, which had that song on it. And I loved it. I remember being absolutely crushed, speaking of Arn Anderson, when WrestleMania 5 came around, and it was it was Strikeforce reuniting, so they had taken the titles to WrestleMania 4, and Demolition beat them, and Rick Martel allegedly got injured, and Rick Martel was out for a long time. Tito was wrestling singles at that point, but there was this big to-do about the reunion of Strikeforce, and they came back in WrestleMania 5, and they wrestled the Brainbusters, and that's when Tito inadvertently popped Rick Martel, and that started a feud between them, and they broke up, and I was so bummed. I was hardcore brokenhearted by that because I just love them as a tag team, but my heart was with Tito the whole time. And unfortunately, Tito didn't win as many matches as he lost towards the end of his career. It's a pretty impressive honor, to have been in 9 straight WrestleManias with Hulk Hogan. I mean, I think that, and
Yeah.
make any well, he made some past 9, but he only made the first 9 straight. He didn't show up in 10. That was 9 was sort of the official demarcation of the old guard and the new guard, I think, or the unofficial one. But I love Tito Santana. I thought he was great. He had a lot of energy. He was super fun to watch. And yeah, that's my last pick.
No, I like Tito a lot. I agree with you. Yeah, he's one of those that when you think about kind of old school wrestlers, right? Tito is right in there on that list. I agree. Okay, so my last one is a guy. If I went to Punk was my most recent. This is probably my oldest. This is a guy that did have a stint in the WWE, but that's not where I grew to love him. I grew to love him in his NWA and WCW days. This is none other than the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby, Dusty Rhodes. Yeah, again, for WWE fans or WWF fans, he's, it was the polka dots and those kind of things. But to me, Rhodes was, he was the guy. He was kind of always the second fiddle to Ric Flair, right? He was always chasing Flair. He was always, he was the everyman. He was the working man. He was, I mean, good God, he was not fit. He was not, didn't have a body but he was just, I can't really even put my finger on it, but I just loved Dusty Rhodes. He could talk, and he was a performer back in the day that God did they bleed. I mean, they bled and bled. They just bled buckets. And I just that's not why I liked him, but he would. Again, he was as quote real of a professional wrestler as there was back in the day, and I was drawn to him early, and I was a fan of him until the day he died. I love the American Dream.
That's a good pick, but it's a little tougher for me on that one because my exposure. So by the time that Dusty had come to the WWF in whatever year that was, I had not watched 5 minutes of NWA, WCW. Like, yeah. I didn't know anything about any of that. I had heard of Ric Flair. I think that was about it. I'd probably heard of Dusty Rhodes too. And I've heard of Starrcade, but I didn't know anything about them. I didn't even know what channel to turn to watch any of that. So the only Dusty Rhodes that I ever really knew was the one that came to the WWE. And
the polka dots.
and severely out of shape, and Sapphire, and a program with the Macho Man, which just never felt right to me, like to pair those two together. Like maybe in Dusty's prime, I don't know. Like I still to this day haven't really seen a lot of matches that he did before he came to the WWE. So I had a really hard time understanding where he fit in, and I felt like maybe he did too. It seemed good on paper, but the whole Dusty Rhodes in the WWE experiment didn't really last very long. I don't think much more than maybe
a couple of years. Yeah, like 80. It looks like 89 to 91. Yeah, I mean it was not long at all.
But I just didn't. I think they had so much talent and so many characters and so much of everything else going on that it just wasn't a good fit for him at the time. And I think he rightfully went back to WCW and did some wrestling, and then of course was a character, in front and behind the scenes. So yeah, I mean, I respect Dusty Rhodes. I certainly understand his legacy and how important he was to all that. It was harder for me to understand why people liked him just because my only exposure was the, sort of the really goofy gimmick that he had in the WWF, and it was just
I could see that.
It didn't resonate as much.
Yeah, I could see that. If you don't know Rhodes before or after the WWE, I would agree that it's a shitty character.
Yeah.
In that couple of years. So, all right, you got. Do you have an honorable mention?
Oh man,
if not, that's fine.
I mean, I have one that I feel like there were a couple people that I really struggled with trying to put on the list or trying to keep on the list. I think if I had to pick one off the top of my head, I think I might go newer actually for this one, since obviously my entire list this week was all Legend era. I think I would go someone like Randy Orton. I really, really love Randy Orton. I think he's fantastic. I think he's got his pedigree is obviously impressive. He's got a father, or is he a second or third generation wrestler?
I think
he's third, isn't he?
I think he is third. Yeah. I mean, I know. Yeah, Bob Orton is his dad. I think he might be third. Yeah, I think he's third.
I just think he's a fantastic wrestler. It was between him and John Cena, and I think you covered Cena to some extent on the last one. And I feel the same way about Cena that you do. I really like and respect him. Think he's the second coming of Hogan, and just seems like a pretty good dude. But like Orton, there's something about him that just has some really curious but really fun staying power about him, because he's been around for quite a while and he's still RKOing people all over the place.
Yes,
and they have taken that finishing move and made something like huge with it, right? Like they've come up with creative ways to innovate that every single time. And he's just, whether he's a good guy, whether he's a bad guy, I want to watch him whenever he's in the ring. And I think he's got a great moveset, and he's just a really intriguing character.
I would agree. Let's see. I got a newer guy too. It would be Edge, right? I mentioned him earlier. I was all in on his corner. I was devastated when he got hurt and he had to retire. But he's one of those guys that I've loved kind of his entire career, right? As he goes through, and he has gone through several iterations of his character. And at this point, he's just kind of the old guy that's kind of hanging on. But he's in great shape, and he looks good in there. I'm just a big fan. I was looking here. I gotta go back to Orton real quick. Orton is a third generation superstar.
Thought so.
And his uncle is Barry O.
What?
That's his uncle.
I did not know that.
Barry Orton is his uncle, yeah, which I think just makes him even cooler.
Of course. Just now I'm bummed that I didn't work him into my 6 through 10.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, hey, we got there. We covered a lot of ground. I'm sorry that it took us so long to get back. I was sitting here actually during the episode going through my phone, looking at some beer pictures and some photos that we took, and I'll post those on the website. But we actually did record a conversation sitting at Missing Mountain. I have no idea what we were talking about.
Actually. I remember we were talking about video games, I think, at the time.
Okay.
Which is not a total stretch from actual stuff. I think I was explaining to you the Call of Duty Warzone game, and we were all over the place as we usually are. But I think video games was one of the primary topics of that.
Okay, well, so maybe we'll get this episode posted here shortly, and then maybe we can fill that one in here in between episodes. But we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. We have a boatload of topics that we're looking forward to, and now that we have delved into the 6 through 10s, we can even revisit some stuff that we've already hit, which I'm really, really looking forward to. Got anything else as a closing tonight, sir?
No, this was a great list. I'm really happy that we got to do our first 6 through 10, and I'm super excited and already thinking about the next ones that we're going to do, because we've covered a little bit of everything. We've done movies, we've done music. Van Halen was one that is going to, I'm going to have to study for at least a week before I can come up with my 6 through 10 favorite Van Halen songs, and many more. So, I mean, I think we'll probably wait till we do a couple weeks or at least a little while before we do another 6 through 10, because we got so many other topics that we're going to shuffle through before we get to another one of those. So yeah, it was awesome.
All right. So until next time, this has been the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie. I'm joined once again by
your brother from another mother pit.
All right. Have a good evening, folks. We'll talk to you soon.